Hello there. So today I'm going to be talking about 1992 and a trinity of computers that were released in that year. Not dissimilar to the trinity of 77, I guess, with the Commodore PET, TRS-80 and the Apple II, but certainly not as impactful or influential as that original trinity, because arguably that trinity led to the UK computer revolution, where the BBC saw this gap. They saw the UK weren't going to keep up with this newfangled computer thing, and they launched this program to find a home computer for schools, and everybody knows that story. Everybody's watched Micromen. But the Trinity of 1992 was interesting for a few reasons, and for me it marks the end of that innovative phase of the home computer. The thing that started in the UK back in 1980, say with the ZX80, and progressed through the BBC, the Spectrums and the Commodores and everything else that came. These very bespoke computers that were very individualistic, were incompatible with one another, each had unique design elements that made them stand apart from everything else. There was no cross-compatibility. And to me, that period of 1980 to 92 was the best time for vintage computing. And certainly my love of vintage computing started in 1980 and ends in 92. There's nothing since 92 that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in consoles, Mega Drives and Super Nintendos and such. Zero interest in those. It's all the home computers that were released between 80 and 92. So in 92, we saw these three computers released about 3 months apart. And the first one was the Atari Falcon 030, which I happen to have. Oh, heavy. I happen to have one here. So this was released in August 1992, although I believe it came to the UK in the following year, probably early 1993. And this is obviously not standing out in the design awards because it's basically an Atari ST case, slightly different coloured keyboard and a slightly different port layout at the back. But this was running a 68030 processor. It could take a floating point, 68881 or 68882 floating point unit, and it also had a DSP in there, which was a 56001. So that's a pretty powerful machine. It shipped in its base form with 1 megabyte of RAM and cost a whopping £599. And it seemed at the time that Atari didn't really know or agree on how to target this computer. Is it a games machine? Is it a serious business computer? Is it a music workstation? And it's certainly good for music, although some of the earlier machines had some bugs and you had to do some jiggery-pokery inside to correct some of those errors. But it did support 50 kilohertz 16-bit sound with 8 channels, so it was pretty good. It wasn't on the market for long before it was discontinued, and then, as we know, C-Lab picked it up a few years later and started producing the C-Lab Falcon, where they implemented a number of fixes, and eventually you got like a rack-mounted version of the Falcon. So I think of the three that came out in this 1992 Trinity, this is probably the most capable from a hardware perspective. And it was upgradable to 14 megabytes of RAM, which is what this particular unit has. This also has the floating point unit in it as well. So yeah, very capable machine, just never really exploited. It never really took off. And there isn't really any software on this apart from the music side of things. I mean, if you're talking about games, there wasn't really anything unique to this machine that would make people buy one. And at the time, its compatibility was an issue with the ST games. But of course, since then, people have been adapting ST games to run from hard disk, and they've also been adapting them to run on the TT and the Falcon as well. So there's a large library available now, but back in the day, I don't believe that was the case. It's a beautiful machine though, and it was a last-ditch effort, I guess. The ST was failing, and game production was significantly down in 1992. As I mentioned, consoles were starting to be on the rise, and the PC was starting to come down in cost as well. So this is really a spectacular failure, I think, and I do love this machine. So yeah, that is the first part of the 1992 Trinity. Let's get that away carefully. The second machine that came out in September 1992 was a successor to an existing machine, but was tailored more to the gaming side of things. Coming out in 1992, a full 5 years after the first versions of these machines had come out. This is the Acorn A3010. I guess a successor in some form to the A3000. It came out with its sister, the A3020, which had built-in IDE, both based around the same CPU, which is an ARM250 running at 12 MHz. And it's a departure from the 3000 because it's cutting a fair bit out. And the form factor is a lot smaller as well. The 3000 is much deeper. But the 3000 had external expandability through a 16-bit module that was here. It also has Ethernet, which this doesn't have. This has serial built in, whereas the 3000, I believe you had to add a chip to enable the serial port functionality. And one of the most innovative things about this computer is the system on a chip design. So like the 3000, this has a ARM CPU, memory, I/O and video controller, and on the 3000 those were separate components dotted around the board. But on the 3010 and 3020 that was packaged into a single chip, a single IC called the ARM250, and it's possibly the first example of system on a chip on a home consumer computer. And for that reason I think it really stands out as something special, because system on a chip now is just commonplace, and this possibly was the first home computer to do that. It's also running slightly faster than the 3000, means there are some games out there that you can play which run at a much better frame rate. But I have to say, the gaming side of this, the joystick ports that were added to this model were really too late in the day, because as I mentioned, the original A305 and 310 came out in '87, so this is 5 years later. Similar form factor, the A3000 came out in '89, still no joystick ports, and so games are going to be released for this thing whether you like it or not. Whenever a computer comes out, one of the first things that happens is people write games for it, but there was no provision for game controllers. Only the mouse, which of course games like Zarch took full advantage of, but games like Elite and Flight Simulators all use the mouse. So people would try and get around that limitation in different ways. They would, create joysticks that plugged into serial ports. They would create joysticks that plugged into Ethernet ports and such. So you'd find a game that worked with a serial port and wouldn't work with Ethernet. Vice versa. There were a number of different approaches that were used, each incompatible with one another. And when this came out, it came with two Atari compatible joystick ports, which are somewhere here, which meant you had yet another derivation of joystick potential in games, and I think they called them Acorn joystick ports. So when you're looking at the games, or the library of games that are available for this, you'll see massive differences in what games support what joystick types. So bringing a games machine out 3 years after the 3000 was just wishful thinking, I think. And the price point as well. So it was $499 for a 1 megabyte model. So it was a good few £100 more than the decrepit, sorry to say, Amigas and STs that were around at the time. And if joystick ports had come about years before, if the machine wasn't several £100 more expensive than it was, then maybe this could have done something. But at that price point, it was never going to defeat anything. And the Amiga has a plethora of historic game titles going back to the mid-80s, and so does the Atari ST. This mainly has ports of Amiga games and some unique titles, There are some decent ones, but most of them aren't really worth playing and don't really compare favourably to the likes of the ST and the Amiga. So, you know, this was a failure, unfortunately, but a very capable machine, and in the right hands it could do absolute wonders. It could challenge pretty much anything back in the day. So yeah, that is the second act of the 1992 Trinity. Now, for Act 3, coming out about a month later, was the Amiga 1200. And the Amiga 1200 featured a 68020 processor. It had advanced graphics architecture, also known as AGA, which could display a hell of a lot of colours on screen. There was some backwards compatibility with Amiga 500 games, although I believe at the time they couldn't exactly tell you what games were compatible and which weren't. It came as well with 2 megabytes of RAM as standard, which is double what the Falcon and the A3010 had. Now the 2 meg of onboard RAM wasn't expandable, but you could add fast RAM, and the CPU ran at just over 14 megahertz. Now, historically I'm a Sinclair fanboy. I grew up with Sinclair 81, then to the Spectrum rubber key, and then moved on to the Plus 2 in about, was it 87 or so, and I left the Spectrum scene and went and bought an Atari ST. So I had the ST for many years. I've never lived inside the Commodore camp, and I've always been on that side of the playground argument, you know, the Sinclair Spectrum side versus the 64, and the Atari ST side versus the Amiga. So I've always been on the Sinclair and the ST side. And I'm now 50 years old, and I still see that going on. We all know it's still going on, that bloody age-old argument of which is better. So I have over 22 computers, I think, now in my vintage collection, but I don't own a single Commodore. So that presents a problem in presenting the third part of the Trinity, but I have the next best thing. So given my historic negativity around the Commodores and the Amigas, how do you go about building a connection with such a machine to the point where you actually want to use it and you want to explore it? Because computers you own in the past, you have more than just a connection, you have like an emotional connection to the things and the games you used to play back in the day. But for the Amiga 1200, I don't really have anything. And if I were to just buy a fully furnished unit and plug it in, it wouldn't necessarily be something that I would dive in and explore and spend a lot of time on. So what I have to do is I have to create an investment in such a machine. And in order to do that, I have to spend money and I have to spend time. And for me, the best way to do it was also to make it, as Louis Walsh would say, to make it my own. So what I decided to do was to buy the parts separately and assemble an Amiga 1200. Now I'm not talking about getting a recreated Amiga 1200 board and soldering all the chips in, because those surface mount things are beyond my capability. But what I intended to do was just buy the board, buy the case, buy all the bits, hopefully all the bits that I needed to create a fully formed Amiga 1200, new and old components. So the first thing I did was I bought a board, a working board, and I got shielding. Now the shielding was in a bad state, the top shielding anyway. It was all rusted, so I went over it with fine wire wool and Brasso to clean it up. I then sprayed it in conductive paint to maintain that conductivity. I have recapped the board, and I also bought these 322 Kickstarter ROMs and fitted those. And I think that's it as far as the motherboard is concerned. Then you need a case. So I bought one of these reproduction Amiga 1200 cases. This is a grey one, as you can tell. And it comes with a bunch of stuff in there, a bunch of screws and bits and bobs that I've not really looked at yet. Yeah, hope I can work out where all these screws go. The next thing I bought was a keyboard, and this was a non-working keyboard. According to the auction, it had or needed a new membrane, so I also ordered a new membrane. But I also ordered new keycaps for it, and because the back plate was in a fairly bad state, I also had to do the old Brasso and polish it up, you know, with the Brasso and the wire wool. I then gave it a very brief coating. I used the conductor paint again because I just happened to have it laying around, and I spent a good long while removing the old keycaps, cleaning the assembly underneath, and then putting the new keycaps on. And I've actually got a video of me doing that, which I will play in high speed here because it took bloody ages to do. Getting them off wasn't so much of a problem. Getting them on, because it comes with extra keys, and I couldn't work out sometimes which key to use, especially in the cursor key side of things. And also the space bar, I realised I had to use the original small springs that go around here and here, and also use the little grabby things that capture the bar. I used from the original keyboard as well. So yeah, that is a motherboard, that is a keyboard, that is a case. So what else do you need? Well, I hope I've guessed it right. I have a floppy drive, has a black button. I'm going to see how that looks with the grey case, because obviously the keys are black, so that might look alright. What else did I buy? I bought the LEDs for it, which I'm not sure what I've done with the screws actually. I've been a bit silly with screws, and they've just kind of amassed in a little area on my desk here, and now I don't know what's what, so might be a little bit of trial and error. I also bought a bag of screws, and maybe there's some LED screws in here. I'm not really sure. I'm just going to have to be really careful. They all look like self-tappers, to be honest. So yeah, I'm just going to have to be really careful on using the right screws, not damaging any plastic. The next thing I bought for the floppy drive was a floppy drive cable, floppy drive power, screws again, and a bracket thing, which I'm not really sure where that goes. Yes. Don't know, but I'll probably work it out. I suspect it goes in one of these somewhere, I guess. Or shall become clear. So that's that. I bought a 2.5 inch drive bay thingy. I'm not sure which way around that goes at the moment, but I believe it pokes through the motherboard. There's these four little positions here, but yeah, I need to just work out, have a look at some videos, disassembly videos, to make sure that I'm putting this in the right way around. And the idea was to use a compact flash adapter, which I've also bought, but I am going to need to adapt this adapter with something, probably 3D printed. I've seen there's a part out there which will then connect to this 2.5 inch and make it all nice and, you know, nice and neat and secure. So that's that. I then bought a PCMCIA to compact flash and a compact flash card here. I'm not sure what format this has to be in, but my intention with this was to be able to transfer files to what the internal drive, that thing. What else did I get? Well, I got the official Amiga OS 3.2, which obviously I got the ROMs and the workbench with that. I got a SCAR cable. I might use VGA, I might use SCAR, I don't know. At least I'll probably just start off with that and see how it goes, and see whether there's anything I need to do on it that requires VGA. That's not a big issue. I got a clip. I believe this is a clip for the board, so that the ground on the board connects to this shielding, maybe. As I say, I've no idea about these computers. I've just been reading up and looking at videos of people, you know, disassembling them. But you don't always see a full disassembly, because often you find screws are missing anyway. So I also bought a badge. I thought, as the keyboard's black, I shall buy a Commodore A1200 badge in black as well to go with that. And then finally, I think, many thanks to Mike Daly, who I was talking to about what I was proposing to do, and I was discussing upgrades with him because he's quite big in the big on the Amiga, probably his favourite computer ever. And so I was discussing upgrades with him, expressing an interest to try and keep it real, keep it as close to original intent as possible, while still giving it a little bit of a kick. And he very kindly sent me a FPU and 8 meg fast RAM board for it, which was very, very nice of him. And of course there's a battery here for an RTC, which I'll probably fit. I'm assuming it's a standard CR 2032, but I'm not sure, but obviously I'll find that out before I decide to insert any battery in there. And assuming that goes in the old expansion-y thing somewhere, like, yeah, something like that. So yeah, that's a huge thanks to Mike Daly. And another thing to thank him for, as he believes I've finally seen the light in terms of going to all this trouble to build an Amiga 1200. He also sent me a wireless tank mouse, which is amazing. So thank you for that, Mr. Daly. So yeah, this is the wireless tank mouse. Didn't send me a battery though, did you? You cheapskate. I'm joking. Yeah, so battery in there, and then it comes with this DB9 to USB thing, which I think you need. Do you need some kind of dongle for that? I ain't got the dongle, I don't think. Plug and play receiver. I'll have to do a bit more research on that to understand, because I think it's... Just have a look at it. .3D printed case, yeah. I presume though I could just use a regular USB mouse with this as well. Which I might do initially until I've kind of figured out what kind of receiver I need. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm hoping that's everything I need to build an Amiga 1200. But we shall see. One thing I must say about this case though, it has been designed around modifications that people typically make to these things. But if you're not wanting to make those modifications, it is actually compromising the look. And especially this bit here, which looks to have been designed for a Gotek cutout. So you effectively just cut out that area there. It's a guide, but we can see here that it's affected the plastic, and this extra structure here has seemingly caused the, so I'm just hitting my camera up there, has caused a sink mark. You can see it there, just around there. You can see that this exists. So you've got this kind of, you can see where the ejection's going in, and then you're injecting thick, thin, thick, thin, and then perhaps cooling wise, you know, the thing has sunk. And to me, on an A surface of a machine, that's too much of a compromise just to give someone a guide, you know, on where to cut a hole, because it does kind of spoil the, it's hard to get it. You can see it kind of present itself there. That is just not good, but you know, it is what it is. I just don't think they should have done that on such a prominent A surface of the case. I'm wondering actually if this key is the right key, because yeah, this escape key is not the right key. Oh! And looking at it here, it does look a little wide. It doesn't sit flush. So this is coming off, and I'm going to dig out the keys that came with this. Probably find out that this is an A600 key. See if we've got any more escape keys in here. Help. Yeah, we do. So yeah, that's just me being silly. That's better. Okay, I'm not sure if the case is going to fit any better because there may be some other issues as well, but let's just have a go. So I just need to have a look now around the case and see what the shut lines are like. It's not bad actually, that, yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's looking fine. The floppy eject button's a bit, you can probably do something a bit bigger because I think I knocked the hell out of my camera before as well. Was straight when I started this video. So yeah, what are these things for? I don't know. Have you got an A1200 recreated case where you're able to fit the bracket in? Did it go in okay? What am I doing wrong? As I say, no history of these. I've never played on a Commodore 64. I've never played on a Commodore Amiga. To you people who don't believe that, it's true. Whew. Tell you what, it's been a hell of a journey. It's taken quite a while. get all the parts, you know, the case especially, because dwindling supplies now. I had to get this one from Australia. And I was originally going to go for black. They'd run out of black though. So black and black keyboard, but maybe it's fortuitous that they didn't have any black, because I'm quite liking this grey for that. I do need to do something with this floppy eject thing though, and I'm assuming a floppy disk will go in there, because the drive does look, if you can even see that with the yeah. So here's the old reverse. There you go, 1200. As you can see there, who made it. This was actually made by the same company who makes the keyboard for the Spectrum Next. And I was chatting to them about this many years ago, when I was looking at different coloured case options for the Next, and they showed me all of the A1200 designs they'd been doing and all the various colours they'd been doing, which look great. This is not a it's not a trivial case, this as well. It's quite a complicated case. They've done a pretty good job, apart from, as I mentioned, this area here where you seem to have kind of syncing going on. So yeah, we've got the LEDs in there. Now I need to stick a badge on it, I think. Can you see the badge anywhere? There it is. So this is I think it's a metal badge, and hopefully I'll get this in right first time. So as we can see, it's not going to fit. I need to kind of, it could go slightly skewed, or I could just stick it in the bottom. There's a little bit of wiggle room there. So I'm not going to find out if this works here, because I'm not going to plug it in. I'm going to have to open it back up again, sort out the compact flash drive. But at least it's together, and hopefully I've done it in the right way. But this is what I'm talking about when I talk about investing in a computer, and yeah, forming a connection with a computer where you never had anything before. And when you've spent enough time working on something, acquiring the parts, spending the money, over time putting it together, it does give you more of a connection to it. And you're more inclined then to spend the time actually doing something with it, not just shoving it in a cupboard somewhere. So yeah. Part 3 of the Trinity of 1992, the Amiga 1200. And it's looking pretty dapper. I think it's come out really well, that. Very pleased. Is there anything else I can do with it whilst... Lastly, there's a PCM CIA card I got for it. I could just stick that in for fun. I'm not sure how you format compact flash card to use with this. My expectation was buying the Kickstart, compact flash adapter that I'll just switch this on, it'll boot up, and I'll be able to store files on it. Goes this way, I guess. So yeah, that would go in here, I imagine. This might be my next challenge, is does the compact flash thing will allow me to insert a compact flash card? And to be honest, maybe it doesn't go any, yeah, maybe that is just it, you know, it's just a temporary thing. It is actually straight, it doesn't look straight on the video, but I can assure you it is perfectly straight going in. So yeah, I guess that is what I'm going to be using to transfer stuff from a modern computer. Once I work out kind of the file system this needs, I'm not even sure what file system the A1200 uses. Can it read IBM PC formatted disks? Can it do 1.44 meg? Don't know. So yeah, there's going to be a whole world of discovery when I fire this thing up and kind of understand, you know, I've got power here, RF and composite. I assume that's video because it's sitting close to the video kind of ports and audio left and right. Parallel serial, I'm not sure, is that some kind of SCSI? I'm not sure what these are, to be honest. One might be serial, but then again, what's that? I know nothing. Oh yeah, and I guess as I'm not going to power it up yet, I'm probably not going to insert the FPU RAM RTC board yet, because I just want to make sure that this still, you know, still works before I add any additional hardware to it. Let's just have a little look at this trapdoor. I'm not sure how it opens. I was assuming you just kind of stick something in that and it opens, and that you could do it from the outside. I don't really want to use any metal on this at this point, so I might just leave this for now and then look at a video of someone else doing it, because I don't want to kind of force it. I assume it is just meant to pop out though. But yeah, I'll probably leave that for now. So yeah, let's get this back the right way up. Let's just take a photo for posterity. But yeah, the Trinity of '92, what interesting computers were made. This undoubtedly was the most successful of the three, and also the most inexpensive of the three, and had the best software support, and had the most written for it. So yeah, and I have to say, you know what, being an ST fanboy all my life, this is probably the best design of a computer that came out of that era. It's a beautiful thing. It is so reduced in size compared to the predecessor, you know, the 500. Never liked the look of that thing. But this thing is a thing of beauty, I have to say. I can admit that now because I'm 50. So cheers.